What happens when a Hollywood legend faces off against one of the most aggressive interviewers in the industry? A moment that no one saw coming. One that would take the internet by storm and redefine what it means to stand your ground. In this gripping interview on The Unfiltered Truth, Madison Steele, known for her sharp, relentless questioning, thought she had an easy target in Clint Eastwood. At 94, he was a Hollywood icon, a man whose values and beliefs were often dismissed as outdated by modern media. Madison was ready to dismantle him, to create another viral takedown that would send social media into a frenzy. But Clint Eastwood had other plans. With nothing but quiet confidence and a simple silver cross hanging from his neck, he turned the entire interview upside down. He didn't argue. He didn't flinch. Instead, with a few well-placed words, he delivered a masterclass in conviction, leaving Madison and the audience completely stunned. This was more than just a debate. It was a cultural moment, a reminder that true strength doesn't always come from the loudest voice in the room. It comes from unwavering belief, from standing firm when the world tries to shake you. Want to see how it all unfolded? Stick around, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss content like this. Now, let's dive into the moment that left the internet speechless. The studio of The Unfiltered Truth was alive with energy, an almost tangible buzz crackling through the air like static before a storm. The audience, a mix of die-hard fans and casual spectators, shifted in their seats, whispering amongst themselves, their faces bathed in the soft glow of the studio's bright, almost unforgiving lights. There was an air of expectation, a collective hunger for something explosive, something unforgettable. And tonight, the show promised just that. Madison Steele, the infamous sharp-tongued host, had built her reputation on the back of cutting interviews, on leaving conservative figures scrambling for words while she effortlessly tore apart their arguments. She thrived on the spectacle, the viral clips, the sharp sound bites that spread like wildfire across social media. But tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't just interviewing another politician or out-of-touch executive. Tonight, her guest was none other than Clint Eastwood. At 94 years old, Eastwood wasn't just another Hollywood name. He was a monolith, an icon carved from the very foundations of American cinema. A man whose legacy spanned generations, whose presence alone commanded a quiet sort of respect. He had been the face of rugged masculinity, of unshakable conviction, of an era that many in Hollywood had tried to leave behind. And for Madison, that made him the perfect target. She had spent days preparing, watching old interviews, dissecting his words, analyzing his weaknesses. She knew exactly where to press, where to probe, where to push him into a corner that he wouldn't be able to fight his way out of. It was a game, and she had played it well for years. The producers stood at the ready, their eyes flicking between screens, hands hovering over controls, prepared to clip the best moments in real time. The social media team was already drafting captions, anticipating the sound bites that would take Twitter and TikTok by storm. The stage was set, the atmosphere electric with the weight of what was about to unfold. And then, Clint Eastwood walked in. He didn't rush, didn't bask in the attention like so many others did. He simply moved, slow but deliberate. His presence alone enough to shift the energy in the room. No theatrics, no exaggerated gestures. He didn't need them. The weight of who he was spoke louder than any grand entrance ever could. The room quieted, just for a second, as if in silent acknowledgement of the legend before them. Madison watched him take his seat across from her, already sensing the moment that would define the night. She was ready. The cameras rolled. The battle had begun. He moved slowly, but with undeniable presence. There was no need for theatrics, no grand gestures or overly staged entrances. He carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had nothing to prove, nothing to gain from spectacle. The weight of his legacy alone filled the room, commanding attention without a single word spoken. As he lowered himself into the chair across from Madison, The tension in the air thickened, though not in the way she had expected. Then, she saw it. A small silver cross, peeking out from beneath the collar of his shirt. Subtle, worn, unassuming. But to Madison, it was a golden opportunity. Her lips curled into a smirk, her mind already racing. This was too easy. The cameras zoomed in, their lenses capturing the stark contrast between the two figures on screen. Madison, young and razor-sharp, exuding confidence, her piercing blue eyes locked onto Clint like a predator studying its prey. Across from her, Eastwood sat with an effortless composure, his hands resting loosely in his lap, unreadable as ever. He was the picture of calm, as though he had already played this scene 1,000 times before. Madison leaned forward slightly, her voice laced with amusement. "Clint, I have to ask, what's with the cross? Didn't peg you for the jewelry type." A light ripple of laughter moved through the audience, sensing the bait. Some chuckled at what they thought was an innocent remark, while others knew better. This was a setup, a test, a calculated move to put him off balance. A challenge wrapped in casual curiosity. But Clint Eastwood didn't flinch. He didn't adjust his posture, didn't shift uncomfortably under the heat of the lights. Instead, he did something far more unexpected. He smiled. Not a forced, media-trained smile. Not a nervous or unsure one. It was the kind of smile a man gives when he's heard it all before, when he knows exactly where this is going, and he's in no rush to stop it. The kind of smile that unnerved opponents, not because it was aggressive, but because it was completely, utterly unbothered. The audience's chuckles began to die down. Madison, sensing a change in the energy, pressed on. "Come on, Clint," she said, tilting her head slightly, as if speaking to someone who had simply lost touch with the times. "You've spent your whole career playing the tough guy, the cowboy, the enforcer, the man who doesn't take orders from anyone." She let her words hang in the air for just a moment before adding the final punch. "And yet, here you are, wearing a cross like some choir boy." Laughter, louder this time. A few people clapped. The producers at the back of the room gave a small nod. That was the clip. The moment they'd been waiting for. Already prepped for Twitter, TikTok, and the endless social media discourse that would follow. And yet, despite all of it, Clint still didn't take the bait. He just sat there, relaxed, unmoved. A man who had spent a lifetime staring down critics, skeptics, and entire generations of people who thought they could define him. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted his eyes and met Madison's gaze. The room held its breath. It wasn't just any smile. It wasn't one of defiance, nor one meant to pacify. It was the knowing smile of a man who had stood firm in the face of scrutiny for decades, of someone who had long since stopped being fazed by the shifting tides of public opinion. The audience, which had moments ago been reveling in Madison's sharp wit, found themselves hesitating. The chuckles began to taper off, their amusement losing its momentum. The energy in the room shifted, subtle but undeniable. Some people straightened in their seats. Others exchanged quick glances, sensing an unexpected turn in the conversation. This wasn't playing out as expected. Madison noticed it too. Years of experience had trained her to recognize the moment when control of an interview started slipping. She adjusted her posture slightly, tilting her head as if to regain her hold. "Come on, Clint," she said, her voice coated with a honeyed layer of faux curiosity, the same tone she often used before dismantling a guest's argument. "You've built an entire career playing the tough guy, the cowboy, the no-nonsense enforcer. And yet, here you are, wearing a cross like some choir boy." The laughter from the audience returned, louder this time. A few people clapped, sensing an escalation. This was the moment Madison had been building toward. She caught a glimpse of the producers in the back of the studio nodding. Confirmation that the soundbite had been captured, ready to go viral. She pressed further. "Come on, Clint. Isn't this a little outdated? A little What's the word? Out of touch? The last echoes of laughter hung in the air when Clint finally responded. And just like that, the game changed. He lifted his gaze, slow and deliberate. The room hushed, the laughter fading into an uneasy silence. The air, thick with anticipation, hung motionless, as if waiting for something seismic to shift. And then, in that unmistakable gravelly voice, steady as a mountain, he spoke. "You think it's funny?" His words weren't loud. They weren't sharp. But they carried the kind of weight that settled deep, cutting through the air like a blade. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. Madison chuckled, but something in her demeanor changed. A flicker of hesitation crossed her features, so brief that most wouldn't have caught it. But Clint did. He had seen this before, the moment someone realized they weren't holding the reins the way they thought they were. Clint was paying attention. "No, well, it's a little surprising, that's all." She backpedaled, her tone lighter now, attempting to maintain the effortless confidence that had carried her through countless interviews. But this wasn't just any guest. This wasn't just any moment. I mean, faith isn't exactly Hollywood's favorite subject these days. Clint didn't move, didn't blink, just held her gaze, unwavering, steady, unbothered. A man who had spent a lifetime standing firm while the world around him tried to shift his footing. He let the silence linger, stretching just long enough for the weight of it to settle before he finally spoke again. "That's why I don't care what Hollywood thinks." The words dropped like a hammer. No embellishment, no justification, just a simple, immovable truth. A ripple moved through the audience. Some had been waiting for him to stumble, to waver, to show a crack in the armor. Instead, he was impenetrable, a stone wall against the tide. The momentum, once fully in Madison's favor, had shifted in an instant. Madison opened her mouth, instinctively reaching for something, anything to reclaim her upper hand. But for the first time in a long time, the words didn't come. And in that silence, the power of the moment settled in, undeniable and absolute. The studio was so quiet now that even the faint hum of the cameras felt intrusive. The balance of power had shifted in an instant, and everyone in the room could feel it. The energy, once fueled by laughter and anticipation, had turned into something heavier, something real. Slowly, deliberately, Clint reached for the small silver cross resting against his chest. He lifted it between his fingers, letting it catch the light just enough for the cameras to pick up its worn edges. There was no hurry, no theatrics, just the quiet certainty of a man who knew exactly what he stood for. "This was my father's," he said, his voice steady, unembellished. No build-up, no dramatic pause for effect, just the truth. He wore it every day of his life, and when he passed, I kept it. Not because I thought it looked good, not because it's fashionable. He turned the cross over in his fingers, his thumb tracing its familiar edges, as if drawing strength from the weight of its history. But because it reminds me of who I am. The audience, who had been so eager to laugh just moments before, now sat frozen in their seats. Their expressions had shifted, from amusement to curiosity, from curiosity to reflection. And then, the final words, the ones that changed everything. Some people wear jewelry to show off. Clint's gaze, calm but unwavering, locked onto Madison. Others wear it because it means something. Silence. A thick, almost tangible silence. Madison, who had built her career on quick wit and sharper comebacks, sat motionless. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have an immediate response. She stared at him, grasping for something, anything, that could take the moment back. But there was nothing to say. Because the audience had already decided. This moment belonged to Clint Eastwood. The clip exploded online. Within minutes, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok were consumed by the moment. Each platform flooded with reactions, debates, and praise. The hashtags trended worldwide, spreading like wildfire. Clint schools. Madison. Faith matters. Respect the cross. The headlines practically wrote themselves. She thought she was going to embarrass Clint. He ended her whole argument. Hollywood mocks faith, until a legend reminds them why it still matters. Memes were created. Reaction videos dissected every second of the exchange. And commentators across the political spectrum weighed in. Some called it the greatest interview moment of the decade. Others simply admired the way Clint had refused to engage in the game. Meanwhile, Madison's usual supporters scrambled to regain control of the narrative. But the moment was too raw, too real. The internet had already decided. Attempts to spin it as a generational misunderstanding or an outdated viewpoint fell flat. Even her network, sensing the inevitable fallout, quietly removed the interview from their main page, hoping the storm would pass. But the damage was done. Clint hadn't just won the moment. He had made history. A week later, under the golden glow of the California sun, Clint Eastwood sat outside a quiet little cafe in Carmel, a town as timeless and unassuming as the man himself. The air was crisp with the scent of salt and fresh coffee. The morning hush interrupted only by the occasional clink of silverware and the distant hum of waves rolling onto the shore. The same worn silver cross rested just beneath the collar of his jacket, an ever-present reminder of who he was and where he came from. A young reporter, her nerves barely concealed beneath her polished professionalism, spotted him and made her move. This was her chance to get the quote everyone wanted, the reaction the internet was clamoring for. She stepped forward, microphone in hand, clearing her throat softly before speaking. "Mr. Eastwood," she began, her voice steady but expectant. "Do you have any response to the viral interview?" For a moment, Clint didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow, measured sip of his coffee, the heat rising in delicate wisps from the cup. He set it down, adjusting his jacket with the same easy confidence he'd always carried. Then, finally, he glanced up, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips, the kind that said he had already made his statement long before she even asked. "Nope." That was it. One word. No elaboration. No theatrics. Just the quiet certainty of a man who had nothing to prove. The reporter hesitated, as if waiting for more. But there was nothing else to say. Clint stood, nodding politely before walking away, his boots crunching lightly against the cobblestone path. No explanations. No justifications. No attempt to sway opinions or chase approval. Because real legends don't explain themselves. They don't argue. They don't seek validation. They don't engage in battles that don't need to be fought. They simply stand firm in what they believe. And that's why Clint Eastwood had already won.